Happy New Year! Let's kick off 2024 with the Batman book. Why? The last time I did this, it went pretty well for me, so why not flip that coin again? This year's offering is Strange Apparitions by Steve Englehart, Marshall Rogers, and Terry Austin, with additional help from Walt Simonson and Len Wein. Before we begin, I should probably provide some context of Batman's status during this time, as the story was once in continuity. Strange Apparitions takes place on the pre-Crisis Earth 1, meaning the main DC Earth before the continuity reboot caused by the epic crossover Crisis on Infinite Earths. DC was attempting to shift Batman away from the goofier Silver Age aspects that defined him for a long time to a more grounded tone in line with the Bronze Age. This meant cutting out most of the Bat family, leaving only Bruce and Alfred, and moving them from Wayne Manor to a penthouse in the middle of Gotham. Sounds familiar? That should be enough context. So let's dive into Batman returns home to see that Alfred is lying unconscious on the floor and is forced to take him to a nearby hospital as Bruce Wayne. He soon learns that around 50 other people have also been afflicted with the same illness, an illness caused by a new villain calling himself Dr. Phosphorus, who is using his abilities to contaminate the water supply of Gotham. While Phosphorus' schemes are eventually stopped, he leaves a few complications for Batman to deal with. For starters, he used his abilities to deliver a series of radioactive burns on the Caped Crusader, and tries to get a corrupt city council member to get Batman to cease his activities, which the crime boss Rupert Thorne thinks is a great idea and tries to use his influence to make it legal. Bruce decides to see a doctor known for being discreet. Unfortunately, that doctor is Hugo Strange, who captures Bruce and imprisons him. And to make matters worse, when Bruce tries to investigate Strange's schemes as Batman, Hugo knocks him out and unmasks him. While his original plan was to take advantage of the wealth of Bruce Wayne, his plan now is to impersonate him, steal his money, and sell his secret identity to 3 people willing to find out. Unfortunately for Hugo, Boss Thorne, who was one of the buyers, decides not to wait and plans to extract the information from him by any means necessary. Things are dire for Batman, but even this dark cloud hanging over him has a silver lining. Enter Silver St. Cloud, apparently the latest of Bruce Wayne's Playboy conquests, except this time, Bruce also finds himself falling for her. She tries to reconnect with Bruce after he is apparently discharged, but is brushed off by a disguised Hugo Strange. Realizing something is wrong, she makes a call to Bruce Wayne's ward, Dick Grayson, aka Robin. Robin saves Bruce and Alfred, who was also captured by Strange, and defeats his turned henchman. As for Strange himself, it turns out that the man would rather break than bend, taking Batman's secret identity to the grave out of respect for his foe. However, while Thorne fails to learn who Batman is, he does manage to draft a cease and desist against the Dark Knight. This is not as big a deal as you would think, but more on that later. While Batman deals with the Penguin, who was one of the bidders, And Deadshot, who is debuting his iconic outfit for the first time, Bruce Wayne is dealing with a different conflict in his personal life. A life that, for the longest time, was just a mask for Batman. As it turns out, Silver suspects that Bruce Wayne is secretly Batman. But fortunately for him, she doesn't pull a Lois Lane and outside of a few questions, doesn't press the issue. The story comes to a head with the third bidder, the Joker. This part of the story is actually the famous one where the Joker tries to trademark fish with his grin and finds out he can't do it. And the Joker doesn't like being told no. As Batman deals with the chaos caused by the Joker, Boss Thorne is also not having a great time. Not only did he fail to get Batman's secret identity, but he's also being plagued by apparitions of Hugo Strange. After a meeting with the Joker, where the Clown Prince of Crime makes sure that Thorne didn't get his hands on what Strange was offering, he can't take it anymore and drives himself out of Gotham, picking up an unaware Silver as a hitchhiker. Silver and Thorne argue about Batman, who Silver knows by now is Bruce Wayne. Thorne throws her out, and she hitches a ride back to Gotham. Unfortunately for Thorne, now that he's alone, the ghost of Hugo Strange attacks him. Silver returns to Gotham just as the struggle between Batman and the Joker reaches its climax, which ends up being that the Joker gets struck by lightning and falls into the river. So, he'll be back. But Bruce's victory is rendered hollow as Silver approaches him, telling him that while she loves him, she couldn't bear to live a life where she would have to worry every night whether or not he would return to her the next day. Though they share a kiss out of a moment of passion, the two lovers part ways. Before going forward, it's important to mention a few things. Firstly, Boss Thorne confesses to his crimes, having been broken down by Hugo Strange's ghost. You'd almost think he grew a conscience. Except Batman had also seen the strange apparition as well, so what's going on there? Secondly, the whole ban on Batman doesn't amount to much, especially to a modern reader, as he acts pretty much the way he normally does, and the police don't make much of an effort to apprehend him. The whole thing is rather tame, for the lack of a better word. The next 3 issues after this serve as sort of an epilogue, and while the main draw is a story about the third Clayface, who melts people with his powers, there is a great scene where Bruce breaks down about how Batman separated him and Silver, and in a moment of anger even goes on to blame his parents, and recoils in horror at what he just said. And that's what makes this version of Batman interesting. This isn't Grant Morrison's Bat God, Tom King's Byronic Bat, or Chip Zdarsky's capable of surviving atmospheric re-entry unaided Bat. He trips up and makes mistakes, but is still well prepared for most situations and remains capable. He's charmingly human, which is something that's often lost as he fights the Joker in their final battle for the umpteenth time. The story also spends a decent amount of time with Bruce out of the cowl, making him more than just Batman's secret identity. I also love Silver St. Cloud. She cares for Bruce and isn't a damsel in distress, but is also willing to draw the line in their relationship due to his activities as Batman. This may feel like a tired trope now, But Silver is extremely well fleshed out and is a three-dimensional character in this story, making their separation tragic and not frustrating. She realized Bruce is Batman because she has spent enough time with him and is intelligent enough to assemble the pieces from everything she's encountered. But she also understands that Batman is kinda necessary for Gotham and doesn't force Bruce to make that choice. The way the villains come into play is actually quite different than it probably would happen in a modern comic. They're connected, but aren't working together. It's not a gauntlet where Batman goes after each of his enemies like every issue, or neither is Boss Thorne or Hugo Strange hiring them to do their dirty work. As a matter of fact, let's break down the various ways they come into play. Dr. Phosphorus is just a generic starter villain. He doesn't really have much more after this, but he indirectly pushes Batman into the clutches of Hugo Strange, who then tries to sell his secret identity to three people. One of them, Penguin, is captured, and Deadshot commandeers his method of escape to try to take on Batman. The Joker is also brought into the story through the auction, but is mostly a wild card, something which is less annoying now than it would be in the future, and is actually kind of entertaining. Something I haven't said about the Joker in a long time. Boss Thorne is in the background and is probably the closest thing this arc has to an overarching villain, as he's the one moving a lot of pieces around. But Hugo Strange also makes a decent case for himself despite his death. Unlike the decades of Flanderization which have turned Hugo Strange into a guy whose only defining characteristic is knowing who Batman is through psychiatry, and is obsessed with him to the point of wanting to see if the Dark Knight rises, the man is surprisingly fleshed out and has depth. Though he does put on a Batman costume that one time. So yeah, that was Strange Apparitions, one of the earliest Batman stories that could be considered an arc, that worked to give Bruce Wayne some depth besides being Batman's alter ego. Elements of the story can be traced to the trends of the time, like relying on heavy walls of expository text and repeating certain plot points every issue to make sure that everybody reading the comic was on the same page. But I found it quite enjoyable, thanks to the great art, excellent characterization, and satisfactory plot progression. It was fun to read an old Batman story where Gotham isn't a cesspool of crime and corruption, making sense as to why people would live there. But the criminal element is still present to the point where Batman's presence, well, feels necessary. Also, Hugo Strange is jacked as fuck.